Hello and welcome to my therapy session. This video will be different than all of the other ones because it's meant to be played in the background. There won't be any excessive visual nor audio editing like there usually is. I won't be jumping up and down my chair yelling about things while using my megaphone. We'll simply talk about the world that's being reflected in the online world and about the way it's being reflected on here. Because I feel like talking and sharing the things I've seen. For the visual watchers, I'll just put something pleasant to look at there. So yeah, let's get the ball rolling. It's hard for me to say it ever was a trend, but I've come to realize that once every few months there's a new video of somebody complaining about having to work a 9 to 5 job going viral and causing a huge uproar, with many commenters asking how exactly did these newer generations become so lazy and entitled to the point when they are crying because they have to work. And every single time it leaves me wondering, when did we, as a collective, as a societal hive mind, became complacent with leading miserable lives where all we do is work, go back home, rest, and work again, with vacations being basically the only times where we can try to genuinely have fun and spend some quality time with our close ones or developing our hobbies. Because the way I've seen those videos, and maybe not all of them, maybe some of those younger folks really are privileged and don't want to work at all. But from what I've seen, they were crying not because they have to work, but because they realized that this is their life now. The days where they could spend their time on having fun are gone because otherwise they are not going to survive. It's not like you have a choice. If you want to keep living within the world you know for your entire life, you will have to lead your life in that way. At least that's the norm right now. So it's baffling, almost psychotic to me, that there's so many people, usually the older ones who lived so much of their life in that way already, who point, laugh, and cringe at kids who think that such state of the world is not okay for them. It's very bizarre and lacks any kind of compassion. That's one thing. But furthermore, it shows how indoctrinated they are, that they think things as they are how it's always supposed to be, or otherwise you are just lazy, weak, and pathetic. When you look at a collective social response such as this, it's good to think of the reasons why there are so many people duplicating the same mentality and responding in a similar manner. And one of the reasons, other than to some extent previously mentioned indoctrination, that I came up with is that perhaps some of them feel underappreciated and like it's not fair that people of this generation have a choice to complain to a larger audience because they certainly couldn't. They would get ostracized by everyone around them, so they do the same to those kids now. And it's really sad when you realize that basically everything revolves around exactly that. You've been a part of some kind of circle, and depending on how people treated you there, it will stay with you for the rest of your life. Sure, you may not be like the rest of them, it may even motivate you to leave that certain place or a group, rebel against them, and it could lead to some positive or negative changes. But the vast majority of people are stuck in a constant loop of circumstances. And I feel like it does play a major part in these cases as well. It became a norm to work in this format, So when you see somebody questioning it and feeling horribly because of it, you are naturally going to think they are weird for having such strong reactions about something that's everyday life for you. It's almost like you are getting personally attacked. And sure, you and me may say that we can see past this. But I'm interested if you monitored your very first reaction to a video complaining about 9 to 5s, because I'm pretty positive I was a little bit perplexed at first, which I actually found interesting a moment later when I quickly shifted to the perspective I have now once I saw the comments roasting a girl for crying about it. I found it interesting because I've seen her emotions, I felt some of them, and was taken aback at how strong of a reaction it is, showcased in front of a camera. But maybe I'm still too young and not enough of an insider as a part of this social construct to not completely feel the fact that this way of living simply sucks. I always totally understood how you can feel trapped because of it. I totally empathize with that too, so maybe I'm also biased the other way around as well. There are older people who have been through times when you didn't have a choice where you can go to work, and some casual jobs you could be assigned to were life threatening. And from their perspective, what we have right now is heaven on earth. But for me, it's more about the fact that your entire life is revolving around clocking in and out of a job that truly sucks. Not work itself. We obviously need it to function properly. I would hope that everybody understands how that works and that their argument isn't that there should be no effort necessary whatsoever. So, no, just because it's better doesn't mean the quality of life has a significant increase. It's still the same old cycle with extra steps. And I said that people from back in the day didn't have a choice compared to today's standards. But let's be real, the amount of choices that individuals of present times have is nothing more than an illusion. And I know that it's a completely different kind of worms. That's a very convoluted and layered topic. But first off, the amount of jobs you can apply to is a scam. Just look at how many will even respond to you. And secondly, education and universities. Now, I know that in America the system is absolutely deplorable because you have to pay a lot of money if you want to earn that diploma, which in turn banks will of course prey on ambitious people from families that don't necessarily have ridiculous amounts of money and provide them with student loans that they will have to pay for the rest of their lives. But even putting that aside, you are making this choice of what you're gonna be doing for the rest of your life when you are still very young and inexperienced. Imagine spending years on getting that diploma and realizing that what you are doing isn't really for you, but you feel stuck doing it because you invested so much time and effort into learning skills for that particular field of work as a young adult, and you don't want to waste it to probably earn much less money than you would if you just kept doing the job that you now hate. I said it's a different can of worms, and here I am starting to delve into it. But I hope it helped with my original argument of how ridiculous it is for so many grown ass men and women on the internet to mock, laugh at, and sarcastically insult somebody for publicizing a depressing moment of realization that so much of their time will keep being taken away from them for possibly the rest of their lives, the same way it's being taken away from those who laugh at them. Also, I wonder whether any of those commenters are also viewers of guys like Johnny Somali, who throws soups at employees and calls them slurs for literally just doing their jobs. I'm sure that nobody actually likes guys like him ever, and content like his is known as ragebait, where you make viewers hate your guts, basically. How to keep attention of many? Well, the easiest way is to invoke some kind of emotion in them. And even if you have no talent or personality whatsoever, everybody can be a deplorable piece of scum to others and make themselves completely unlikable. It's not a skill or ability. In fact, most of creators, and I'm using this word very loosely, like this are so damn boring when you strip down the layers of public embarrassment they put themselves through every time they start recording. It's actually incredible. There's no charisma or a single interesting coherent thought to be found. I'm not sure whether it's because they are just awkward and lack the ability to present anything, or if they are just this dumb. Either way, it's undeniable that it is the easiest path to. I don't want to say success because that's not how I define it personally. I think they are quite miserable. So instead, I will say money. The easiest path to earn a good amount of them bills, as everybody could potentially do it. Granted, if they get rid of any sort of morality and dignity that they have first. It's really scary to think about how so many people can decide to become horrible to others just for numbers, not even for an actual audience, not for another person liking what you create. No, even those who like this kind of clickbaity, extreme kind of content are just a number to them, a singular one at that. So just one doesn't even matter one bit to those content vomiters. It's undeniable that on the internet, numbers can make or break someone's day, can dictate your entire mood, and maybe not you specifically, but of a lot of people. I personally can say that I definitely feel better when I see that a lot of people watched the thing that I worked for many amount of hours on, rather than just couple of humanoid creatures seeing it. But the way I view it, and granted I'm also a smaller content creator, so take it with a grain of salt, I guess. I don't think that perspective is going to be ever drastically changed. Is that behind those 50 to 60 views that show up as an arrow pointing downwards, showcasing just how badly my video is doing, there was an entire crowd of living beings watching and listening to something a complete random, made. And from that number, there were probably about 10 to 20 on average who watched the entire thing and gave it their time off of their days. Hopefully, somebody even enjoyed it. And that's a pretty unreal feeling, if you ask me. I do get how it's tough to feel any sort of impact, as weird as it is to use that word about them videos, when there's no interactions whatsoever. Nobody comments, there's no likes or dislikes, so it doesn't feel like you're talking to somebody. But those numbers that we are so fixated on show an audience that does exist. If you have 3 views, then you have to say thank you to your mom for watching. Okay, that was a joke, but you get the point, hopefully. Before I look even more ignorant than before, I will mention that I understand that it's also influencers, YouTubers, and streamers' jobs, and a lot depends on those numbers doing well for them. But still, as long as you do have any kind of audience, there are always opportunities. You're still being heard, more people can still come if you start or keep doing something interesting. They're not just simple statistics. People have their preferences, and it takes the algorithm to show just one of your videos to bring new people in that could potentially get hooked on your content. You're not cracking the code by being interesting. They're just interested in what you'll do next. And that's a good sign because from 7 billion of humans on this planet, there's no way, no shot that you're so niche you're going to interest only select few. We are not that special. Your content, your person just wasn't exposed to them before, or they weren't interested in what they saw before, and that's why those mystical numbers take a dip. Algorithms control a lot. Most people won't ever give a creator a chance because they can't do that if they never see you in the first place. And that's why online creators are trying all kinds of cheat codes to get into good graces of the algorithm. And things like nepotism or buying into a social media app work better than hard work and perseverance because of that. In that way, it's exactly like a business, really. Abusing the system is more efficient than actually being efficient. So I kinda wanted to give a glimpse into another perspective that you probably never really thought of before, a perspective of a grifter. And while I'm not exactly one myself, although one could argue probably, but they treat it as a numbers game because that's often the easiest path to securing the bug, even if it comes with tarnishment of your name and a high risk of backfiring. I am not excusing them. They still lack the empathy and moral awareness. Maybe it's because they are blinded by the visions of greater numbers. They're still doing bad things regardless, and I don't condone that whatsoever. I just ponder of reasons why so many people are ready to throw their dignity away for a couple of TikTok mentions, and why they are ready to hurt others to achieve that goal. Because most people aren't born evil towards others. There has to be a cause that make them become that way. Also, just to be clear, when you achieve some kind of online fame in this way, you can't be mad afterwards for people not sticking around once proverbial crap hits the fan, right? When you stop making something interesting to them, and a friendly reminder that in this scenario, your kind of interesting things to make are rage baits and basically embarrassing yourself and possibly others on camera. So when you stop doing that for even a moment, or even furthermore, if you don't up the stakes on your next videos or next live streams, if you won't do even crazier stuff, then there's no way you can possibly believe that people will stick around to watch you because they are not there for your content. They are not there for your personality. They are there for crazy stuff they can probably get mad at or laugh at. So, yeah, fine, you bring in a lot of audience at once, but that audience is not sustainable unless you keep upping yourself one up. And there's only as far as you can go without getting into legal trouble, which has been shown on the internet multiple times. And once you do that, then you are in jail or in prison in worst case scenarios. Not exactly the greatest future ahead of you then. Notice how every time, even the biggest grifters, after they do something and they get an article on Forbes, even in extreme cases, right? When they do that, after all the smoke clears from that situation, there's usually what I would call an intermission when nothing's happening with them and nobody basically watches them. I mean, sure, they have numbers because the algorithm is pushing them heavily because those are some of the biggest creators out there because they were constantly grifting, and that's the 0.1, even probably like 0.0001% of actual grifters that made it through mostly connections and money, right? So it's not realistic for a random person to just show up, do some crazy stuff, and sustain even that amount of audience that they have when they are not doing anything crazy or crazier than they were doing before. So if even they have moments when nobody cares about them, and then the cycle repeats because the popularity is oozing away from them, then what do you think will happen with a guy who gained, let's say, 100,000 followers on TikTok once for doing some crazy stuff? He will fall into irrelevancy very quickly, 99% of the times. And because what he did was already extreme, because otherwise he wouldn't gain popularity so quickly, there's not really a way to keep one-upping oneself for long. Because if you do something that's very similar to what you did before, then people will just lose interest. So while I do understand how I could at the beginning sound like I'm promoting in some way this kind of style, but if you want to look at it as money making opportunity, then I guess the closest thing I can tell to convince you against it is that this kind of behavior is a career killer, and many opportunities will close down for you once you choose that path. And the success ratio is very slim to begin with, even the initial success part. Because, truth be told, there's a lot of people that are doing insane stuff already that don't even get the initial spark from the algorithm. And that's obviously a good thing. All of that doesn't change the fact that we can laugh at how ridiculous it all is and how dumb and harmful their actions are afterwards. Why so serious, right? Speaking of laughing at somebody over the internet, we tend to do that on here. I'm not hiding it, neither are you. If creators or companies do something very stupid, devious, or straight up evil, we could potentially call them out on it and find even more dirt they've buried. It's not a secret, right? Then what about those internet entities that are friendly towards you, that extend a helping hand and who assure you that you can share anything with them? Creators collaborating, living together after knowing each other because of influencer circles. We've seen it all. And one observable constant in these kinds of relationships is that they are fragile and do oftenly involve backstabbing or using others for own merit. Why is that? Well, to try answering this question, let's start from something that's obvious but maybe a tough pill to swallow for some. Internet relationships are not the equivalent of the ones you will or would have in real life. And when I say internet relationships, I mean the ones that are either solely or for vast, and I mean vast majority, existing on the internet. Texting is a completely different form of communication. Voice calls won't give you all the visual indicators, and FaceTiming from the confinement of your home or any other place in the world still won't give you the feeling of shared privacy, the physical signs, etc. It's much easier to, for example, hide certain things on the internet, play a better person than you really are, and hide your flaws, which is not necessarily something bad, just different. That's what it boils down to. And this part includes everyone. It's the same for us all. Another thing that's now getting more specific to either content creators, business partners, or just parts of bigger online groups is that it's much tougher to see individuals as people Even subconsciously, we could see them more as just another random saying something to the group from time to time. And in case of specifically content creators and business partners, that could lead to seeing those people as a device to get something out of, to grow out more numbers, because that's what this entire social media game, or more accurately, field, is to some. And even if it isn't, again, they could be doing it subconsciously, as at least a small part of those creators wouldn't have the same lack of compassion towards a living, breathing being standing next to them. I'm saying at least a small part because I'm well aware that talking behind one's back exists everywhere, especially in business, and the main difference between real life business relationships and the ones over the internet is that it's simply easier to play pretend in the latter. It requires no skill of deception whatsoever, unlike its physical counterpart. Let's focus on content creators' fallouts for a moment, though, because I think that this numbers game greatly incentivize YouTubers and streamers to use each other for gains and abandon each other once there's either no further profit from a relationship, or even worse, when their reputation could get tarnished if they kept associating themselves with that particular creator or an entire group. And just to be clear, I'm not talking about extreme examples like Noel Miller distancing himself publicly from Cody Ko. Obviously, I personally wouldn't want anything to do with somebody who did something as heinous as Cody did. I'm more so talking about any type of mild controversy, or even just a simple fall of social media relevancy. Because it's no secret that doors will open up once you start hitting certain milestones, and will close down on you once you get out of that path leading towards notoriety. Long lasting friendships, romantic relationships, all of those are sometimes generated mostly for benefits of having somebody like that that's also online famous, bringing in more content ideas and clicks. And I think that's just really depressing. I know that most of them are rich, but that doesn't change the fact that I feel generally sorry for everybody involved in such predicaments. I don't think they are aware of how much surrounding oneself with fake materialistic people and being one yourself can mess up with your head. Issues that come from living in this way are not something you can just fix with all the money you'll gain through it. There are so many examples of situations like this that I feel like it'd be unfair to start throwing out names. If you follow the online world whatsoever, then you can probably think of at least a few yourself. And if you didn't, then just think of one of the most popular names on any streaming or video platform from like 2010s who aren't as well known now. And there's a big chance they've been pushed aside by some of their friends or content groups on not so great terms, to say the least. The world of influencers can be really foul if you let it consume you, so it's best not to get involved in it too much and choose your surroundings wisely in general. I think that's something we could all learn from. We've been teeter-tottering around a far bigger and more generalized subject while talking about both of these topics. So let's tackle the convoluted questions of empathy and how it works or doesn't in social media spheres. I know it may sound rich coming out of somebody who makes jokes about creators who've done some whoopsies over the course of their careers, but I genuinely believe that the way topics about people and their well being are being tackled is, for the most part, extremely one dimensional. And while some internet personas truly deserve that for the things they have done, like predators or harassers, there are other cases where it seems like they are getting continuously dunked on by millions of commenters and commentary YouTubers to the point where they are seen as literal monsters over either a mistake that they did or keep doing, or because of their admittedly sometimes harmful opinions that most disagree with. Am I saying we shouldn't talk about such cases? Absolutely not. Is my argument then about not making fun of them? Strike two. It'd be incredibly hypocritical of me to try and moralize people over entertainment. You are bound to be criticized when you publish something on the internet. It's natural and absolutely okay. I'd even entice people to do so. It's just that YouTube or Twitter can become an extreme type of hive mind where everybody talks about the same person in the same way as everybody else, dialing in on their screw ups and amplifying them 10, 100, and 1,000-fold like they are not human. When you talk about something traumatizing, something difficult for you, or when you cry over a text or a video, you will usually get words of support. But when you did something wrong before that people ostracized you for, the results will be quite different, even though you've been genuinely hurt as well. It has a lot to do with the obsession of picking sides that I believe got hugely amplified over the internet. I mean, we as humans always searched for the place where we could belong, for people with similar type of mindset and beliefs to ours. And social media can connect us in this way through anything, including hatred towards a certain person or a particular kind of behavior that some people are openly exuding, or even just a thing or any medium in general. And sometimes it can take one comment, one video for the ball to start rolling, because seeing that somebody feels the same way makes that feeling of hatred inside us seem validated. And then we create this echo chamber of dehumanizing a public figure for something they do or say. Again, just to be clear, I'm not talking about critique, because that's great and insanely beneficial in my opinion. One of the best features the internet ever gave back to us. I'm talking about cases when trashing a living being becomes so prevalent to the point they are being sent threats over saying that they don't like a certain show or a trend, or over lying about something that they never delivered upon to their viewers, which, that sucks and they should be held accountable for it. It's just that they are still human beings first and foremost, and majority of people don't seem to care about their side of the story ever. There are also cases where audience fully dismisses a statement of victims because they had a shaky past, like the Codico situations again, which may be a slightly different topic, but still fits in with the lack of empathy theme we are mentioning. And it's truly sad to see that it keeps happening. Not saying we should believe everything, quite the opposite, but to basically not even give them a voice to say their truths is just as bad as maliciously trying to destroy someone with fake accusations. Those type of situations should be verified fairly. Sure, lack of empathy through continuous hatred towards an online figure is one thing. But what about the Hollywood way of dehumanizing popular people? As I've already mentioned, it's much easier to show only the sides of you want others to see over the internet, which can lead to somebody looking like a perfect being. And perfection is inherently not a human trait whatsoever. Hatred and idolization, two opposite spectrums that lead to the same outcome, to depersonalization of entire groups of people. And if you don't see them as humans or even living, feeling beings, really, then naturally empathy towards them won't exist the same it would to, let's say, a next door neighbor, or simply won't exist at all. How can they have worries when their life is perfect? They have money, a house, a family. I'm sure you've seen comments like this directed towards various influencers, creators, and rich people alike. And it's absolutely delusional to think they can't have problems that completely destroy them from the inside just because of this perfect image that you can associate with living a life with privileges that you don't have but you wish you did. Saying sarcastic things like, boo-hoo, a millionaire is crying, without it being just a simple, ridiculous meme, when you really mean it, is probably the peak of lacking empathy towards a person that shows us only the good parts of their life, their success. That's what we ever saw from them. So the thought that they could be miserable as well may seem absurd. But remember that no matter how they portray themselves, they are still just human, not Mark Zuckerberg. And we need more than just material things to feel happy and fulfilled. That's why I never had problems listening to rich and famous people voicing their sadness or doubts, even though I didn't exactly come out of a privileged background myself. Because at the end of the day, that guy that walks around with his camera filming another $1 million mansion that he recently bought is still a human being just as everybody else, and they deserve to be treated as such, regardless whether you idolize them or hate them. There's also a very thin line between one another over social media because you can clearly tell that a lot of creators that were once loved and like loved to bits, I mean, after they do something wrong once or twice, then there's a complete shift when it comes to the perspective towards them. People start completely antagonizing and hate them. So you can be loved once, and then once you slip up, then everybody will turn on you, which is kind of crazy. But obviously, everyone is quite a hyperbole for me to say. But I'm sure it feels as if everyone is turning on you in those cases. To avoid ending this segment on only a grimmer note, I want to say that I'm really proud of how we normalized caring for animals that are being abused. It's great seeing so much sympathy for living organisms that did nothing wrong but exist, getting, for example, used for views, like that garbage, disgusting animal rescue videos that were and sadly still are being staged. But that entire side of animal abuse as a whole is a deeper issue that I will definitely talk about using concrete proof once the channel becomes more known to a larger audience, because otherwise it's just too depressing to me and I just feel helpless. Wait, I wanted to end this on a positive note. Damn. Okay. I'm really glad treating your pet with proper respect and looking out for them. Their happiness and their sadness got so much further normalized thanks to the internet. There, great job, you. You know, since we are on the topic of emotions and displaying them on social media, there's been something regarding the knowledge of human psyche that's been bothering me ever since I've made a video on YouTube predators where I used psychological citations and examples of predatory creators to try answering a lifelong question of Why is this such a prevalent problem, and why are there visible patterns that keep on repeating themselves in such cases? It's a very deeply researched video, so if you are interested in things like that, I'd suggest looking it up. And every time I work with psychology, I come to the realization that the behaviors I'm researching really are, for the most part, all just patterns of particular kind of environments and behaviors, which makes me recall a guy that shared his outlook on how he's scared of psychology, as he feels as if it tries to put us all in labels a bit too much for his own comfort, making us all seem just like machines following a code, fully comprehensible and understandable to the outside world. And while we are definitely not at that state when it comes to scientific advancement in this field, as someone who is very much personally interested in human psyche, I never bothered to think about it from that perspective before, not even as a possible evolution of psychological research. So, in order to do this statement justice, I now want to pose a question. Does psychology make us and all of our activities to a bigger extent predictable? When I say us, I'm talking specifically about internet users as a whole, even though a lot of it could also be said about everything outside of it as well. But we'll be using examples of some internet phenomena to try to come up with revelations or even solutions. Just to clear something up, I don't want to be misunderstood. Just because the aforementioned patterns fit in perfectly, that doesn't mean that this particular individual that fits all the criteria is 100% sure to do something or react a certain way. I more so mean that usually most people who are confirmed to take certain actions have things in common. As I said, we are not nearly as solved as human beings, at least not yet. So things like statistics, while they do have some merit, cannot be a basis of a logical assumption. Now that I hopefully cleared my name from being called a pretentious prick forevermore, let's get right back into those allegations by saying we'll start with mental disorders and mental illnesses. And while I might sound demented right now, I actually want to use this argument against the thesis that we are discussing. So hear me out, okay? A long time ago, probably a couple of eons have passed since then, I made a video where I was showing and reacting to content about depression. The way I would describe most of it is by comparing it to the typical motivational edits, but instead of being extremely shallow in a pseudo positive grind 24/7 kind of direction, it's the polar opposite. So it feels fake miserable, is what I'm saying. It's like looking at people imitating something that they don't quite understand, so they just go with stereotypes or put the depression label on anyone that feels any negative type of emotion at the moment. As a fun fact, I'll also add that I did a video on fake motivational videos too, so it's ironic in a way for me that they are basically the same thing in a huge part. Like, the meta is very similar in both of those genres, but that video has been created so long ago that you probably weren't born yet. It hasn't been public for a long time now. And I have a personal agenda against both of those genres. But regardless, the point that I'm trying to get at is that it's insane how so many influencers specializing in making content about particular mental issues don't know crap about them. And it's even more insane how big of an audience they cater towards either way, which to me shows how little of an understanding we have as a collective. And technically, if psychology would be able to label us into certain type of behavioral patterns, then why the hell so many of those stereotypes don't belong to people with particular disabilities or disorders? I mean, have you seen what influencers did to DID? For those who don't know, the abbreviation DID stands for Dissociative Identity Disorder, previously known as Multiple Personality Disorder. The name was changed because the latter one isn't really fully accurate to how a mind suffering from this disorder really works. But you'd be hard pressed to find at least one influencer who actually gave a damn to do as much as read up on it before faking a traumatic response such as this over the internet for some quirky content, like how, for example, Trisha Paytas infamously did for quite a long time as well. But if you think that's old news, then no worries. Just type in DID on TikTok search bar and I guarantee that part of that community are imposters among us to this day. If so many people are making theatrical performances out of psychological issues and it has an audience that relates to it and screams so real, then how can we say that psychology allows us to accurately pinpoint how a person will act in certain circumstances based on those psychological diagnoses? Not to mention, playing a character over the camera also comes into place once again here when it comes to just strictly talking about making calculated predictions about internet personas. So, while the reason it doesn't work at all here may partially be because of ignorance, because as I said, a lot of the creators didn't even read up on the things they were playing as. So I can only assume it's the same with their audience. It's still a far cry from making people's movements and the outcome of said movements predictable. In my videos about predators, I found out, however, that environmental issues regarding certain groups over the internet are legitimately a thing that could create, or maybe more accurately, enable some monsters though. But I think this is more common sense than any real psychological formula that works every time. Just because somebody comes from the trenches doesn't mean they will steal your money the first chance they get. But I'd wager it's statistically more probable that they would, because they have legitimate reasons to do so. So, no, at the point that we are currently in, I don't think psychological work is putting us into neatly arranged labels. And you can find a plethora of proof on any social media app that it isn't the case. So far, we had hatred and attempts at destroying somebody as a form of entertainment, idolization and showing a perfect life as a form of entertainment, faking relationships as a form of entertainment, using animal abuse as a form of entertainment, and using mental illnesses and disorders as a form of entertainment. Everything revolves around entertainment. And although one may say it was always the case, I mean, just look at Coliseums as an example, totally pointless bloodshedding just for the higher class society members to have a spectacle, I would argue that demand for entertainment is at an all-time high in the era of the internet. I know that we are dopamine goblins constantly foaming out of our mouths to see another 15-second long Instagram reel of a cat jumping up and down a building, or a TikToker dancing to Bongo Cha 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 by Caterina Valente. I've seen the attention span graphs, and furthermore, I, to some extent, see it in myself too. But I'm not even talking about just that. I mean, just look at Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson. That event was on eyes on everyone. And it's not because of Paul brothers' impeccable technique. That's something beautiful and mesmerizing to look at. Nor is it because Mike Tyson, at the spring age of damn near 60, is still the very peak of the sport. No, it's because they are both household names from different worlds. That's the appeal, not the actual art of boxing, which is considered entertainment all by itself too. All sports are inherently just pure entertainment. But that's not enough anymore. We are constantly moving the goalpost. Majority of people don't want to see just the best of the best duking it out to see who's currently the greatest. They also want narratives, a story, a name they can attach themselves to. And I think this was always the case. Storytelling has been a device we used ever since before we started forming societies. It's just that the world of influencers and famous content creators opened us up to a perverse amount of such narrative types of entertainment, to the point where nothing else can quite give us this much of a high dosage of enjoyment over a form of media that we consume daily. The simple activity of, like in this example, a sport, just isn't cutting it anymore. And because of the ever shortening attention span of ours, we tend to latch onto one story after another almost instantaneously. So, in turn, there's always a very high demand for another event or a beef. It feels disingenuous and a lot of time very low effort. Quantity over quality, promo over the product, to quote one of my favorite rappers ever, Khan. I think this line is insanely accurate, as it's clear as a day that every social media app focuses on the time their consumers spend on their product. So, for owners and developers, the most beneficial way of work is constant dopamine inducing content spewing, and instead of investing money to up the quality, you'd be better off just putting those funds into getting yourself some ads. It all moves really fast. Blink and you may miss your opportunity, kind of thing. So, from that perspective, it's no wonder why there's so much cloud chasing anywhere you look, where people create crazy situations or rivalries to get into that algorithmic spotlight for at least a brief moment. And once that moment passes, then, well, the cycle repeats. I've heard attention gets pretty addictive once you get a taste of it, at least to those who longed for it and who were doing some crazy stuff just to get it for the first time, to hopefully one day become this household name that I just mentioned has so many privileges. For every Hacktua podcast, there's thousands of island boys who could never replicate their initial level of fame and properly monetize it. So they just end up with basically nothing for the embarrassment they put themselves through. And I think that's just extremely rough. I mean, even outside of just your content haunting you for the rest of your life, there are also legitimate consequences. Like, I imagine it must be a bit harder to find a job for somebody who has done something insanely stupid over the internet once, because it will stay there stamped over your name, which is ironic considering how much value we put on names in the entertainment industry. From a book author to a football player, your name is basically a brand on its own. A game where a 40-year-old LeBron James, who's still great, mind you, just not at the top of the food chain anymore, is leading his team, will sell way better than a game with Nikola Jokic, who's currently the best player in the NBA, being the star of the show. Not because of quality of the product, but because of marketability, because of the name, and because of the storyline that led up to this point. And that's how it works everywhere with anything nowadays. Social media only amplifies this effect. Is it something bad, you may ask? I don't know. I don't have the answer to that question. What I do know, however, is that it leads to straight up bad and low effort content being produced and promoted on YouTube, Twitch, or TikTok, with those platforms showing favoritism towards such fleeting and evasive success stories. The last thing I want to mention is the hot topic of AI, and I was inspired to talk about it by a random video that was using an AI voice that I have mistaken for a human up until it started mispronouncing names like 5 minutes into the video. If you got this far into this episode of a lunatic talking to his screen, I'll give you a little gift by spoiling the fact I'll be making a proper video on AI content farms in the future, where I'll be using examples and show the negative side of AI, meaning the opportunities of creating slopes that contain wrong information it gives. But that's not exactly what I want to tackle on now. I'm personally not against AI. I am not against using it in the process of creating basically anything either. If something works better and more efficiently, then it will help us move forward as a society far more than if we'd stay complacent and let humans handle everything. It's just another possible step of evolution, I guess. And throughout history, people were multiple times against devices that ended up making our lives a whole lot easier and our development smoother. The problem starts in fields where such efficiency doesn't help and can actually harm the work that AI is creating. The process of making content or an art piece is everything. So when you don't use AI to help you out and instead you make it do everything for you for these particular jobs, not only can you then argue it loses a lot of its value, but you also won't be invested in it nearly enough to check whether there's anything wrong with it in the first place. The same way you would with something you created using own hands, or even hands of human employees. Then they would be the ones checking it more truly, if they have any time to do so, that is. The point being, letting AI do everything for you is comparable to giving humans impossible deadlines where they need to rush the product, with the only difference being that there's no perceivable effort put into it to begin with. Communities seem to be pretty divided when it comes to this topic. There are camps that are completely against it, and then there are also people who do everything with the help, to put it mildly, of AI. And I think it's kind of a taboo topic for content creators, which is fairly odd to me. I mean, it's not taboo when it comes to hating on it. It was kind of a trend to create the fear mongering, moon style videos of AI will destroy the world as we know. But there isn't much talk about how you can use it in content creation properly. I, for example, can share with you that, god damn it, I'm mentioning this video again. Okay, in the video about YouTube predators, I'm sorry I'm using that video so much. It just, it demanded a lot of work, so there's a lot of things to talk about there, I guess, and a lot of points of references. I used AI there to help me verify whether a psychological work has been debunked over the years or not. I've done my own research and didn't find anything, so just to make sure, I used ChatGPT so that it can check its own database whether it can see anything concrete about it. I also told it to write a script about YouTube predatory problem, but that's just out of curiosity more than anything. I never used even a line from it. It basically made a PowerPoint presentation anyway, so not exactly my style. But using AI as a point of reference can be a very helpful tool, the same way you can take inspiration from already existing works. Furthermore, I also don't think that using AI voices is in any way, shape, or form wrong. Sure, it's not exactly my cup of tea personally. I prefer to feel emotions while listening to somebody speak. Otherwise, I can trust the speaker even less than I initially would. But if you don't want to expose your voice to the world, or you don't have money for a better microphone, for example, and yet you still have an idea for content that you want to create and publicize, then it's great that such opportunity that's also pretty high quality, by the way, exists. We need more, not less chances for people to express themselves comfortably. Anyway, if you have any input on any of these topics, or just the video, or the channel as a whole, or about how your day went, then I'd be more than interested to see your comment. I'll stop yapping and just give you the stage now. It's all yours. There will probably be at least one more episode like this in the future, and maybe more if you like it. So, yeah. Maybe I'll also mention your comments there because that sounds like fun, possibly. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next session.